Have you ever said something to a man, maybe a passing comment, a moment of honesty, and suddenly everything changed? He pulled away, or got strangely closer, confused, right? You weren't trying to start anything, but somehow you touched something deeper than his pride. You touched his ego, and here's the wild truth most people never talk about. When you unintentionally bruise a man's ego, you don't just hurt his feelings, you awaken his obsession. You see, men are taught to lead with strength, confidence, and control. But underneath all of that is a fragile identity built on approval, image, and unspoken insecurity. Carl Jung called it the ego, the mask we wear to survive. And when a woman comes along who doesn't worship that mask, who sees right through it, it shakes him to his core. He can't stop thinking about you, not because you played games, but because you disrupted his carefully built world. This isn't about manipulation, it's about understanding the psychology behind why some women leave a mark long after they're gone. In this message, we're diving deep into the secret no one dares to say out loud, how hurting a man's ego, even accidentally, can make him obsessed. Ready? Let's begin. Most women don't realize this, but when you challenge a man's ego, you're not just clashing with him, you're colliding with a boy inside him who never felt fully seen, safe, or validated. Carl Jung taught that our adult personality is often a mask shaped by childhood conditioning, and for many men, their sense of self, what we call the ego, was built around earning approval. Maybe it came from impressing a distant father, maybe it was about being the good boy for an overwhelmed mother. Either way, it was performance-based, conditional, so when you offer a simple critique or stand firm in your truth, it can hit deeper than you intended, not because you're harsh, but because it pokes a bruise he's been carrying for years. That sudden defensiveness, the emotional shutdown, that's not about you. It's a defense mechanism formed long before you ever entered the picture. Here's the truth. You didn't cause his wound. You revealed it. You reminded him of a time he felt powerless or not enough. And because his adult identity was built to protect that little boy, your words shake his foundation. So don't take his reaction personally. See it clearly for what it is, a mirror, not an attack. When you understand this, you stop dancing around his ego and start relating to the deeper man underneath it. And ironically, that awareness, it's what makes you unforgettable in his eyes. Have you ever been told you're too emotional, too intimidating, or too distant by a man who seemed drawn to you one moment and disturbed the next? That's not clarity speaking, that's projection. Carl Jung warned us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What that means is simple. People don't see you clearly. They see themselves in you. Their hopes, their fears, their unfinished business. So when a man says you're too confident, it often means he feels insecure. When he accuses you of being too cold, he might be struggling to connect with his own emotions. And when he says you're overwhelming, it's likely because your presence reflects a depth or freedom he hasn't fully embraced in himself. Here's the twist. This projection can create obsession, because the more he sees in you what he can't yet see in himself, the more magnetic you become. Not because of manipulation, but because your very existence triggers something buried in his psyche. You become a mirror he can't stop looking into, a reflection that both challenges and attracts him. It's not personal, it's psychological. You awaken parts of him he's ignored for too long. So the next time a man criticizes you in a way that feels oddly intense or off base, ask yourself, is this really about me, or am I just holding up a mirror he's not ready to face? Sometimes, a man doesn't become obsessed with you because of your beauty, charm, or even your love. He becomes obsessed because you unknowingly shook the foundation of who he thought he was. Carl Jung called this phenomenon ego death, a moment where the identity someone has clung to begins to crack. It's not just uncomfortable, it's soul-shaking. And if you've ever held a mirror to a man's unintegrated self, if you've made him question his worth, his patterns, or his truth, not out of cruelty but by simply being real, you may have triggered that exact unraveling. He might feel like you broke him, but in reality, you awakened something far more profound. the confrontation with his own shadow, the insecurity he masked with bravado, the fear he hid behind control, the pain he never dared to feel. And when that unraveling begins, many men don't know how to process it. So what do? They fixate on you. You become the symbol, the trigger, the puzzle piece that made the whole house of cards fall down. You didn't create the wound, you exposed it. And because healing that identity crisis feels too big, too vague, too terrifying, he latches onto the last thing he remembers before everything changed. You. That's not romance. That's transformation disguised as obsession. You weren't the problem, you were the awakening. There's a reason a man can't stop thinking about the woman who doesn't chase him, doesn't try to fix him, and doesn't bend to impress him. She's not playing games. She's embodying a deeper truth, a magnetic energy that Carl Jung would call the anima in motion. Jung taught that every man carries a hidden feminine within, his anima, a longing for emotional depth, mystery, softness, and stillness. Most men suppress this side in favor of action, logic, and control, the traits they believe make them masculine. But when he encounters a woman who fully owns her feminine energy, something shifts. She doesn't pursue, she attracts. She doesn't argue to win, she speaks with presence. She doesn't rush, she trusts timing. And that energy doesn't just impress him, it awakens him. Suddenly, his goal-driven mind feels unstable. Why isn't she chasing like others? Why does her silence feel louder than their praise? Why does being around her make him feel both seen and stripped? This is the polarity magnet. Her feminine unsettles his masculine ego, but simultaneously draws his soul in. He can't explain it, and that's exactly why he's obsessed. Because deep down, it's not about her body, her words, or her behavior. It's the energetic invitation she offers, one that says, I am whole, I am here, and I don't need to chase what is meant for me. That presence alone disarms his ego and activates his longing. Every man carries silent scripts within him, ancient roles passed down through culture, family, and unconscious expectation. Carl Jung called these archetypes timeless patterns of behavior that live in the collective psyche. For many men, these include the hero, the provider, the savior, roles that make him feel needed, strong, and worthy. But what happens when you, without even trying, challenge one of those roles? Maybe you don't need saving. Maybe you don't praise his efforts. Maybe you mirror back that you're already whole. And just like that, his carefully constructed identity begins to tremble. He may not even understand why, but suddenly your presence makes him restless, intrigued, obsessive, not because of who you are on the surface, but because of what you represent. To him, you become more than a woman. You become a mythic figure in his unconscious story, the one who makes the hero question his strength, the one who sees beyond the provider's paycheck, the one who refuses to play damsel to his savior. This isn't just emotional, it's psychological. You activate a spiritual conflict within him, who he thinks he is versus who he's meant to become. And until he integrates that inner battle, you remain unforgettable. Not because of manipulation, but because your energy speaks to his unfinished story. He's not just obsessed with you, he's haunted by the version of himself you revealed, and the man he knows he could be if he ever fully faced it. Sometimes it's not your presence that makes him obsessed, it's your absence. Carl Jung reminded us that we often only realize the value of something through loss, and this truth hits harder for men whose egos were built around pursuit, conquest, and control. When you were available, when you poured in emotionally, offered your presence, gave your warmth, he may have taken it for granted, not out of cruelty, but because his reward system was never wired to recognize emotional abundance, only the chase. So when you detach, not to punish, but to reclaim your peace, you interrupt that system. Suddenly, what once felt predictable becomes a mystery. His mind, trained to hunt what feels elusive, starts filling in the blanks with fantasies, regrets, and what-ifs. He starts replaying your last conversation. He imagines what you're thinking. He feels the void, and that void echoes louder than any words you ever said. This is the reversal trigger. You stop feeding his ego, and now it starves. He starts wondering why you're not chasing, why your energy feels different, why you're suddenly unreachable. And that shift, it makes him realize he wasn't just interested in your attention, he was addicted to what it made him feel about himself. But now the mirror is gone, and what's left behind is obsession, not with you, necessarily, but with the version of himself he can't find without you. That's the power of feminine detachment. It's not cold, it's catalytic. When you challenge a man's ego, intentionally or not, what often follows is a wall of defensiveness. It might look like sarcasm, withdrawal, mockery, or even anger. These reactions are not strength, they're shields, protection mechanisms he's learned to use whenever his sense of self feels threatened. But here's where your power lies, in how you respond. Most people meet ego with ego. They argue, explain, plead, or retreat. But when you don't react, when you simply observe with calm, grounded presence, you send a completely different signal. You're not participating in the drama. You're standing in your truth. Carl Jung believed this kind of non-reactivity is a sign of individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. It means you're no longer driven by the need to be right, approved of, or understood in the moment. You're centered, and that centeredness, that inner fortress, it disarms him. It confuses his usual defense system. He expects a fight, a tear, a retreat, but you offer none of it, just stillness, just presence, and that's when the real impact begins, because now he's not battling you, he's face to face with his own reactions, his own shadows, his own unhealed self. Your peace becomes more powerful than his ego, and whether he admits it or not, it shakes him. Not in a destructive way, but in a way that makes him feel. And in a world where most people are just reacting, your silence speaks volumes. That's not coldness, that's emotional mastery. Obsession isn't always the outcome. Sometimes your presence doesn't just shake a man, it awakens him. Carl Jung believed that relationships are alchemical in nature. That means they're not just about companionship, they're catalysts for transformation. When you show up in your wholeness, not needing to impress or please, you reflect something powerful, truth. And truth has the ability to pierce through ego defenses and awaken the shadow. For some men, that's terrifying. It leads to obsession, control, or withdrawal. But for others, those truly ready to evolve, your presence becomes a mirror that liberates, not just unsettles. Instead of projecting or reacting, he reflects. He begins to see his patterns, his fears, his unfinished emotional work, and rather than run from it, he leans in. This is the difference between obsession and awakening. Obsession says, I need her to feel whole again. Awakening says, she showed me I already was, I just forgot. If you've ever wondered why you impact men so deeply without even trying, it's because you don't just play a role, you carry medicine. You're not there to be his ego boost. You're there to reflect his becoming, to invite him into a deeper version of himself if he chooses to step into it. So don't mistake silence for failure or distance for disinterest. Sometimes the greatest love you offer is the one that frees someone to meet themselves. And if he's ready, your light won't trigger obsession, it will spark transformation. And there you have it. What starts as a bruise to his ego can become the very spark that ignites his obsession. But remember, this isn't about manipulation, it's about awareness. When you stop shrinking yourself to protect his pride and start standing in your truth, you awaken something powerful, not just in him, but in you. If this message made you see things differently, go ahead and give it a like. It helps more women find this kind of content. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another deep dive into relationship psychology and feminine power. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever unintentionally triggered a man's ego and noticed a shift in how he treated you? Was it obsession, withdrawal, or something else entirely? Drop your story or your thoughts below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and remember, your power doesn't come from playing small. It comes from being unapologetically you. See you in the next one.